Peace, family. It is your brother, the pragmatic Shade Blak, and I'm here with my co-host. And usually I'm the co-host, but I'm rocking out with my brother, Knowledge Born Allah. Usually you might see me with him on his platform, like I said, as the co-host. But today I get the privilege of having him as my expert co-host as we break down the cinematics um and the as we give an in-depth look at ATF Allah the Father, the new series that was put out. I Am God Allah has produced a series chronicling the father and his time in Harlem. Right now they're at sea, up at episode 4. So we're gonna give you a breakdown of not only just the material and the history of the father, as far as the accuracy, but also the quality of the work that this brother is putting out. And is it how entertainable is it, or enjoyable, I should say, the entertainment value. Part of me, I'm up here making up words and stuff, but the entertainment value of this specific platform. So my brother Knowledge Born Allah, peace, Lord.
Peace and God. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfect, Lord. I hear you perfect, man.
Yeah, I definitely was glad that you invited me on to kind of give a breakdown of the series. It's very mixed emotions associated with it. So for us in this culture who live out this culture daily, you know what I mean, it's a great opportunity to sort of dialogue. I didn't heard the quote unquote the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, for what you do and who you are, they kind of coincide together. It's a great opportunity to build on and add on.
Indeed, Pete. I appreciate that. Definitely. I appreciate having you. You know what I mean? You're an expert at what you do. And with that said, let's dig into this. Allah the Father. Um, First of all, it's completely AI. And so you have to deal with whenever you're talking about AI, we have to be honest. Whenever we're dealing with AI at the level that we normally see it at, there's going to be some things that might look a little weird to the average person. Like visually, there's going to be some weird aesthetics going on. And this does not escape any of that. But the quality, I would say, of the images, the quality of Allah, reading the comments in the video, reading the comments under the post. There was people who didn't realize it was AI actually saying that, who did they have play the father? This guy's the spot on. And I'm sitting there cracking up, because of the obviousness of the AI. As far as the story, how do you feel the story has been moving along from just a viewer, just watching it without an expert eye, just someone who wants to learn about the father? How has this story, we're at episode 4, so far been moving along as far as you're concerned?
I think the God did a decent job of inferring, right? The source material is very limited. And as a filmmaker, um, you work with what you have to work with. So the imagery of New York, recreating a time that no longer exists. You can't go back to a place, the gentrification, all these other things, trying to make 1960 come alive in 2026. So he flashes from Danville, Virginia, on the beach to the Korean War and him coming home from the Korean War and seeing his family as the ears would tell it, right? Because this is all oral tradition with the exception of a few books. So this is all oral tradition, sitting down with people and getting their take, and their take is fair weather. It's almost like an eyewitness account. You understand what I'm
Right.
saying? It's like, so your eyes were good back then, but your eyes may not be good right now. So you're asking somebody to recall something if that's a direct connection, right? So he tries his best, or he strives his best to recreate what led up to him becoming Allah. Like, what were the circumstances, the sights and the sounds, and then what's happening at the same time. So he has to try to show a man, a veteran, somebody trying to make it after the military, out on the street, him joining the Nation of Islam, what that relationship was like with him and his wife Dora, with not a lot of detail that was given. So there's some space to where they're inferring, right? And if you know the gods, there's a difference between holy and righteous. And I think
Indeed.
that he captured righteous and he showed holy as a contrast. You understand what I'm saying? So it was a different sort of situation that would set the things up in the stage. So I think just from that perspective alone, just looking at what story he's seeking to tell, what picture is he looking to paint, I think he did what he could with what he had in that moment. So I think they're showing different layers, right? If you just look at episode one and then how it goes into episode two to three to four, it kind of flows. Kind of flows. It's not like what's this? Like what's this doing there? Like why? What's up with this or that? And he his approach kind of like if you looked at Power or anything else, like any of the stuff that's out right now, he's giving you at, on the next episode of Godfather of Harlem, whatever the case may be, he's still giving you these elements and the dramatization of a time before with other details that might have been left out. So I don't want to give it a rating per se, but I'm just thinking about that aspect. Like if this was the goal, did he achieve the goal? I say the brother achieved the goal in regards to dealing with something that he had limited information on to be able to go from a source perspective.
Indeed. I would say that it definitely felt like the time. He absolutely was able to bring the feel of the time. As far as how the episodes moved, I felt like episode one to me moved a little bit slow. And episode two, it picked up, but episode one and two both seemed to be moving at a pace where I was sitting there kind of like, all right, how much like I'm waiting for it to get to the next step. I'm waiting for him to move from this step to the next. We're here right now. We're in Danville. You see the flashback. It moved as if it wasn't moving in the agreement with time. And if that makes sense, like it seemed to exist. And it wasn't until episode three that as we get into episode three, that I would say that it started to move at a pace where now it's like, all right, the way it's began to move as far as now we're seeing the in the mosque, we're seeing the questioning of the supreme wisdom lessons. But really, we actually started with putting to Clarence 13X to Allah. So right now we're seeing Clarence 13X as we go into episode three turn into Allah as he's becoming Allah in episode three. So I think that that part of the storytelling is good though, of seeing that. I don't think it moved too slow where it wasn't watchable. It was boring. I'm just saying I felt like that part of it was kind of slow. Which the irony of it is none of these episodes is even I think a full half an hour long. So it's a lot of information. It's a lot of time being moved in a short time. So for me to say it's slow, it's just the perception, like I said, of how it felt. As far as the accuracy, it's hard to tell because, as you said, we're talking about oral tradition, we're talking about word of mouth, we're talking about witnesses, and not only do witnesses not always have that photographic callback memory to be able to remember what happened, but also we have to keep in mind that we remember things the way we would want it to remember it, or according to how we view things at the moment is how we remember it. So that right there, seeing the relationship of him and the brother, seeing the brother just. I like that. I like seeing the relationships develop. As far as quality, we've seen a lot of the brother Ben X has a whole thing going on where he's doing the AI series and all that. And I can't even front. He does an excellent job as far as the quality of it. So there's standards that are met are set when it comes to making a full AI project. And if I had to just grade that part right there, I would say that he is right above a C. You know, he's right above the average part as far as the quality of it. It's not crazy to look at. You're not looking at it like, yo, this is just crazy, goofy AI. But you don't get past the loudness and the levels of the voices, and the voices not matching the characters, the expression of the character or the scene. If you understand, you know, when the officers shot the brother and the back and forth, it didn't feel, it felt all the way artificial. None of that felt like it was real. Now I know that to me it appears that the goal more is to get the story out, and of course certain things will have to be sacrificed, like that type of quality, which I can live with as long as the story is told right. Don't get me wrong, but get in a full criticism and a full critique, I would have to acknowledge that that did be at times seemed a little weird, the speech and all of that. And I wondered to myself, was there anything that could have been done about that? Was there any way of, you know, were the voices in fact fully AI, or was there somebody doing the voices and the characters and all of that? So you spoke on the tradition, you spoke on the word of mouth, how people look back at it and remember it. Um, what issues might you see with the portrayal of the story? For example, in the comments, I read people really complaining about having the father smoking in the outfit, in the FOI, in his FOI outfit. You know, there was really people who felt that was a problem. You know, I seen people who talked about the language that was being displayed in this, like that was a problem. Now, before you answer that, to me personally, I felt like that would have been disingenuous not to have those elements in there, if those are the elements that correlate to the stories that we constantly heard and knowing the time period. But what kind of issues have you seen any with this, and what was your take on what I just mentioned?
I think that's an excellent question to look at wholeheartedly. When we look at Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz's portrayal on and betrayal on the screen,
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that are, you know, headbutts in regards to what the actual life was. With Allah and Dora, there there's a thing that's presented, right? There's a story where folks are in there and Allah went in the room and Dora was like, "Hey, don't you be believing him? He ain't Allah." You understand what I'm saying? So it's these are things where if you heard them, you have to strive your best to illustrate them, but not allow it to overshadow, right? So when you look at this type of situation, folks who wasn't in the Nation of Islam don't know the Nation of Islam either. So to see him in this FOI uniform smoking a cigarette and them cussing and using the N word, that's light in comparison to what the real things are and the inner workings of this whole situation, right? So I think that I Am Powerful Allah did a great job of showing the contrast in between the internal strife of what he was reading and who he was meeting. The lessons is the goal. So showing him being studious in regards to the lesson, know that when he came back from Korea, he had moved up in the ranks very quickly because he had understood some languages and he came back with some martial arts. You understand what I'm saying? So his mastery over language and the material, he was elevated. You understand what I'm saying? And his real goal was like, yo, who in the F is teaching my woman? You understand what I'm saying? Like, so I think all of those things are apparent. And then there's a foreshadow in regards to Malcolm being in a position and him being in a position, and then him and Malcolm suffering the same thing down to the same dialogue, quote unquote, to illustrate, okay, you might have thought I was bugging. Now look at your turn type of situation. So the story is Allah's in the temple, and he's like, yo, the black man is God. What we dealing with over here? So that's some internal dialogue unrest, and he's teaching it. He's not keeping it to himself. You know what I mean? So that's how the story goes, and this is how it's kind of illustrated. So, like when you look at the criticisms and critiques, I don't think either the people who are watching, for the most part, have been involved with either one or the other, so they don't know how the other operates, and especially in 1960s kind of situation, because what this is present day, 60 years later, ain't the same thing that it was 60 years prior. So the contrast of those things, of what you have in your mind, back to what you were saying about recollection. So they might have had some heydays in the 90s. They might have some heydays in the 80s, right? It ain't the same now. And it definitely ain't the same then.
Mhm.
So the same is true for our culture, the culture of our God. It's not the same as it was in the 60s and the 70s, going into the 80s and the 90s, independent on where you are, where you got it from, and
Right.
whom you got it from. So again, these are wise tales, mouth to ear, oral tradition that's telephone from 60 years ago.
Right.
And we going off of redacted FBI files, and oral tradition. Both of them are flawed. Both of them are flawed. So that sort of space to tell a story, the inaccuracies in regards to the historicity, and then even with the portrayal of him in the FOI uniform and all of those things, I think the God did as best as he could to strive to respect, but also show the contrast, because we know members and leaders at that time were jockeying for position, and they were looking for any opportunity to out somebody that they could move out the way so they could move up. That was very apparent. So not just the FBI and the CIA infiltrating the nation physically, but the zeal for somebody wanting to try to move up in that way. So I think he strived to keep it respectful while showing the sharp contrast of Allah internal unrest with what he knew to be true and living in the lessons versus what he was seeing in the organizational rank structure. So the other tiny criticism I'll say in regards to his relationship with Malcolm, it wasn't in the way that it was presented. Like he just was like, get up out of here with all that. You understand what I'm saying? Like he was bucking. Like it wasn't a situation like that. It was, they had the highest mutual regard for one another. So that was different. That pain point was the truth of who Allah was versus who they were showing Allah to be, and everybody else was just a laborer. So that dialogue could get so much to where you could kind of lose sight of what's actually happening. If you don't know when you don't.
Now, what you were saying about um, the relationship between Dora and Allah, I felt I had a different understanding, you know, because what you just said, you were talking about a man who wants to know who's teaching my woman. And I felt like the God did an excellent job in giving us that expression and giving us that sentiment of someone who wants to know who is this man and why is my woman so caught up in this man's teachings? What is this man's words? And at first, I remember watching it and I'm saying, damn, he kind of, what is he hating? I'm like, he hating on Elijah a little bit. You know what I mean? But as it went on, I'm realizing, okay, this is what even brought him in the fold in the first place. And so he's looking at it, to get to the root or to get to the understanding, as we say. So I definitely felt like he did an excellent job of that. The portrayal of Malcolm, um, before I even get into that part, there's a lot of we know how the stories, especially dealing with Allah's departure from the mosque. We know that his departure from the mosque is told in several different stories. There's stories of he was kicked out of the mosque by Malcolm, and then the reason why he was kicked out because of his teachings. He was kicked out because of his gamblings. He was kicked out because of the drinking. Then you have he left the mosque and he went out into the streets. Then there's actually that he was sent out from the temple or from the mosque into the streets. So whatever story that I am God Allah decided to go with, I couldn't really be too upset with, because these stories are all told as if they're absolute truth, depending on who you hear them from. And there are people who all claim that had been there or who was at least around at that time and who have these contradicting stories. So I'm not sure exactly what his source was, but I can't get mad about that part. I'm sure there are people who are going to have issues about just that part of the story because it doesn't coincide with their part of the story, which goes back to, well, my lesson said light. You know what I mean? And mine said on right here. You know what I'm saying? This goes back to this. So I thought in that aspect, I couldn't get upset. Now, as far as the portrayal of Malcolm, I always pay attention to how Malcolm is portrayed, because I can't go back on a film. I can't go back to a film portrayal and see Malcolm completely portrayed righteously. We can give Denzel his credit for his imitation of Malcolm and him capturing the the mannerisms, the articulation of Malcolm, and in a sense, the essence of how Malcolm walked. But that movie didn't actually give us the real Malcolm. So we have to keep that in mind. So saying that to say, as the years went on, the portrayals got even weaker and weaker, to the point where we got Malcolm, you know, practically begging and pleading with Betty in certain portrayals. You got Malcolm overseas and asking questions like he don't know what time it is, and just you got uh Che Guevara talking crazy to Malcolm. You got the Arab white boy talking crazy to Malcolm, and Malcolm just looking lost without a way. So as we see these portrayals, and we seeing how they do our brother Malcolm, and I'm looking at this portrayal, and I can't really give too much criticism on it, because with the exception of the interactions with the father and the interactions with Elijah and the little snippets of him delivering speeches, they don't really give you much of Malcolm. So the image of Malcolm is pretty much up for us to how we remembered Malcolm. As far as the relationship between the father and or Allah and Malcolm, I felt wasn't. I felt he could have done a better job right there. I personally felt like he could have done a better job showing the mutual respect amongst the two men in that aspect. Um,
Yeah, I think we agree on that. But if you don't know it, you can't show it, right? So maybe he got some other sort of information that had him move otherwise, right?
which goes back to the, like I said, the different versions of why he even left the mosque. You know, we know that this is Malcolm's. You know, this is Temple number 7 or Mosque number 7. So he, of course, and like I said, these are all forgivable to me. None of these are like something that this is trash. None of these is like the what Spike did. You understand what I'm saying? None of this is like what Regina did. You know what I'm saying? So just to be honest, I'm just looking at it, and I'm looking at the type of criticism that I'm pretty sure because I'm looking in the comments, I'm watching the videos, and I'm looking and seeing what the people are very critical of, and it's gonna happen. It's inevitable. But um, getting back to what I was saying about the betrayal of Malcolm, about the relationship, I thought it was funny how they had the, you know, what he say, hard die, what he say, die, habits die hard, what he say? When you had Malcolm come to Allah, then you had Elijah come to Allah, come to Malcolm, and then they had Elijah ask him about Allah. Ask him, man, what about this guy, the father? What about him? Now tell me about him. Which I don't know if I like that part yet. I haven't decided if I really like that part yet. I gotta see where it goes from there. That can't be a cliffhanger. I'm gonna need conclusion to that part and to see how that part's conclude. Because I'm not sure if I like that part yet, you know. But yeah, that's where we're at right now, season 4. Now, how did you feel about the portrayal of Malcolm and Elijah? Because I felt like the portrayal of Elijah was light, but I feel like these are important pieces to the story. And you're like you like I've told stories and you've seen the stories that I tell, so you know how important um the co-stars are to me. You know how important the supporting cast is to me. You know, I feel like they are more of a supporting cast than the brother I Am God Allah is making them out to be in his project. But this is his project, and he has to tell the story from the point of view that he wants to tell it from. But I would say that in my personal opinion, he's making these characters to be he's making them too far in the background. What do you think?
I think that if you want to get to the gods, certain things you got to sacrifice. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that he did as best as he could because God, in our culture, there has not been a real peaceful relationship between the gods and the nation. Just being clear, right? What it was in the 70s, what it was in the 80s, what it was in the 90s, all the way to the early 2000s. It was not a olive branch sort of situation. So if we're looking to see what Allah established for somebody who had no clue that Allah came to the people that the nation forgot about, the cats that was on the street, because after a while, the clientele became people who had some change in their pocket versus everybody who was strung out on drugs and who was in the gangs and who was in the street. So what a lot coming to those people in the street and the young, like even the young, whether they was on drugs or not, they were forgotten about. Like with many of these organizations, there's nobody's catering to the babies, right?
Right.
So he's coming saying the babies are the greatest, and he's giving that. We want to get to that, So it's like it's almost most people don't read the introduction of the book; they get right into chapter 1. They don't read the forward. They don't read the introduction. When you want to build something and come with instructions, most folks don't read the instructions. They get right to trying to figure it out based off of the picture on the box. So he gave us what he could from my perspective. But we want to get to this. Now people are like, yo, the streets is like, who's Allah? So naturally, word had to get back to the messenger, like, yo, who this cat calling himself Allah? You know what I mean? So how it's presented gave me a little eerie, the feds is tapping the phone situation. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like, all right, let's deal with this part on an aspect like very quietly, ever so lightly. You know what I mean? So for the people, I think they could have had a greater portrayal, but we want to get to the gods. We want to get to the first nine born. We want to get to where they at, where they coming from. We want to get to Abu Shahi. We want to get to the meat of who what Allah was actually doing in the short time where He was amongst us in the prison. You know what I'm saying? So a sidebar that I appreciated is, he in the bar and Waleem come in and slide the number, yo. You understand what I'm saying? I was like, that's slick, right? It's slick. So you know that he ain't have no yes men around him either. I appreciated that. Like Cassie's going back and forth, blah blah blah. You heard the women talk about their men. You understand? Like the dialogue that know that okay, this comes from real people with real relationships and real relationship problems. You understand what I'm saying? So that part I think was a great opportunity to show what hadn't been seen. You know what I mean? What hadn't been seen, but maybe everybody coming because they coming in to be the sons of Allah. They're not even the last 5% or the nation or any of these adaptations that come later. So now this story to tell, and he got now cipher episodes to show. He got to show the first assassination attempt. He got to show Madawan. He got to show uh Azrael. You understand what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And you got to put all of these things, into perspective in that time. So if I'm looking at the Nation of Islam, the place that he left, and I'm giving the Nation of Islam the same attention and credit, and then the God story, the story of the first nine of Harlem and Medina, because they're equally important. They're equally important. So now, if I'm watching this joint now and I get the first nine born of Harlem, and then I get a mention of Medina, I'm gonna be like, but you was talking about these bow ties real great. So you understand what I'm saying? So if he snip that and throw this in, this becoming a space of functionality where you really dive deep into the meat into the end. Because it has to end. You understand what I'm saying? It has to end. And then there could be some spinoffs, but it has to be a comprehensive story that goes from the beginning, the middle, and the end. You know what I'm saying? Because my man, like, yo, you remember son you was talking about? We about to go see him right now. That's the thing, right? So I'd rather have those details be, illuminated versus these other ones where it's like, all right, I got my own personal feelings about that, but I'll cast that to the side as long as these other things that are of vital importance don't get this.
I mean, and that's like we said, is it's each episode isn't even a full half an hour, so it's definitely understanding that you're putting a lot of information in a short time. Even a 10-part knowledge cipher episodes series won't give us the full scope of everything. Something's gonna have to be missing. So I do get that part. I just felt like it could have been just a little bit more. It could have been a conversation that was had. Not we don't need to get too much background, but maybe a conversation that would have gave us a deeper understanding of the relationship of these men, at least early. And it's only 4 episodes deep, and we know that these men had a relationship both past. We're talking about Malcolm now and Allah had a relationship past their time in the nation. Going back to the point of what you said about how it gave the FBI's watch and how it ended with the tell me about this man, call itself Allah. I think that that's part of the problem that I had with it. And I ain't gonna say I had a problem. Like I said, I haven't decided if I like. I don't know if I like it or not yet. And part of that is it gave me the feeling of I just I just sat you down talking about Elijah talking to Malcolm. I just sat you down because you was insubordinate, and I just gave you the same speech that you gave this man. Unbeknownst to me, I literally gave you the same speech you gave to this man. Now this can go either way. That's why I said I'm not dissing that scene just yet because it can be redeemed in a further episode. You understand what I'm saying? That's why I said it just can't. Just don't leave me there with that. Don't leave me there because then I'm feeling like the feds are watching. I'm feeling like, all right, I just sat you down. I just spanked you. Now I want you to go tell on your brother for me. You know what I'm saying? That's how I felt about that scene. And that might not be the case, but because of that's how they left it. And if that's not the case, I'm gonna have to give it up to good storytelling. Overall, the story, well, episode 4. Well, now we're going into episode 5, so we'll be at the power episode the next time. Up into episode 4, we get Danville, we get the flashbacks, we get a little brief inside look at Allah and his wife Dora. We get the inside dynamics. We get to see her conviction and her, her belief, you know, in the nation, in Elijah, in the teachings. We see it actually coming between the two of them now. These is all parts of the stories that I wouldn't have gotten, without this. So I think that that's very interesting. And we see that this is not a story where, and when you look back, it's like Dora led him. You understand what I'm saying? And I don't want to get into these other stories, but we know that the nation has a history of stories where the woman done led the man into the situation. You know what I'm saying? Without explaining how the woman led the man into the situation. Just she was into this and he followed. So I feel like him even questioning what she's into and then him looking at what she's into, joining it, but then getting his own understanding out of it that differs from what she believes and what she's taught. I have to commend the brother on the job of that as far as his storytelling goes. That's good storytelling right there. And it's very comprehensive. So I have to give it up to that brother um, to be 4 episodes deep. It's something that if I wasn't watching it just to give uh an analysis or a breakdown of it, or even an opinion of it, it's something that I would still watch and I would continue to watch as far as the edutainment value. You got the storytelling, you got the education, and you got the entertainment mix. We know that there's gonna be embellishments here and there. We know that there's gonna be the liberty of saying, okay, we need to create this dialogue, and this is what we feel like this dialogue probably sounded like. That's inevitable. So I can't even get at him about that. So I just want to say to be 4 episodes deep is something that if you're interested in the history, I would definitely suggest that you watch it, but also watch it like you watch any other film that's based on a true story. If you know the history or you know the events that coincide with the history or historical events that's being presented, then cross-reference that. Don't look at any of this stuff on film, especially when you're talking about a dramatization. Look at it as exact. But as far as the portrayal, as far as what was going on, as far as the people that were there, I haven't seen him deviate from the story to a point where I have to commend the job that he's been doing so far. if you have a problem watching AI videos, this might, if you can't get past that, this could be problematic for you. If the weirdness of the audio sometimes and the visuals not matching up, if that right there is something that distracts you, that might be problematic for you. But overall, I think that those are minor things, and that if you're actually interested in this story and want to see a portrayal that no one has done yet, a portrayal that no one has done yet, I think that this is excellent. No one has done this. We haven't seen this piece. I don't even think a solid documentary on Allah actually exists. So I have to commend the brother on that. And yeah, those are the only criticism I can say is if you have an issue with the AI, and if you have an issue with the hey Allah, what's going on? What I mean. I do get annoyed about the whole, and we're not going to deal with the end, but justice. I get it. I do know that the father had that in his speech. I've heard many brothers who emulated themselves of Allah who's spoken like that. But I think that he's getting a little bit. I think I am God Allah. I commend what you're doing on the overall, but I do think that that's getting just a little bit overboard with that. We get the point. It's almost sounding like Umar Johnson with the always repeating itself. You know what I'm saying? Like it's starting to give me that feel a little bit. Because that right there, I have to admit. But I would suggest the people out there watch it, give your own criticism, give your own critique, but also cross-reference anything, any historical event that you feel, so you can see for yourself. Me myself, he did a good job with the brotherhood, with the Harlem Six, integrating that, showing that, going into the jail, telling the young brother, teach. You in here to teach. So, what do you say though? What's your overall assessment of it? If I had to rate it right now, I would give it. Like you said, you don't want to grade it. Me, I'm gonna grade, and I'm gonna give it right now. I'm gonna give it a B. Right now, I'm gonna give it a solid B.
I think I agree with that. My thought in my mind, right? What I said about Medina. If Medina is not given the tribute in this thing right here, it could be Harlem, first nine born, that ceremonial. Actuality, though, it's Medina. So if we don't get some Medina, if we don't get something in the desert, if we don't get some Pelon, if we don't get none of that, my assessment would be a little different. You understand what I'm saying? But for right now, as far as storytelling and inferring, right? I was laughing when you were speaking about the relationship dynamic. I went to Brother Bangers, right? Elijah Muhammad's the man, just like you. Like that's if you could do anything right to show that there is a difference in between people in position and organization, where it was when they first started versus later, who needs the nutmeg now, brother, sort of situation. He did that. He did that. He did that with a man and a woman that love each other. And then they had the moments where it's like, I'm going this way, you going this way type situation. Too. He did that. He humanized Allah. You know what I mean? Like that's an important element because we get real spooky and real religious, and then we say we ain't spooky and we ain't religious and we don't take nothing on face value. I beg your pardon, sir. You understand? Like I hear just the spookology that comes out, and it gets very, very Catholic Pope type situation. And I think that this is the undercurrent that kind of follows this situation. Like, well, who's he? to do this type situation, and we done went through that a bunch of times already with this iteration. So a solid B. I agree with that assessment. I just don't want to, seem like I talked it up and then we don't get nothing but everything in Harlem type of situation. You know what I'm saying? Like even Asriel in that relationship with Now Just contribution to this nation. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying? That's a whole
yeah,
story within
yeah.
itself. But I know he can't touch on and talk about everything. But
You
he's
got
not somebody
Jamesburg,
that's
you got
new.
Asbury Park. These
Yeah.
was,
He's
these
he's
was
not
places that
somebody
was
new
represented.
to this culture though. He's somebody who's entrenched. And I'd rather somebody who's entrenched in this culture be telling the story than Michael Muhammad Knight or Paul Guthrie or one of them other, you know, bastards that's out here. Bastardizing, put this whole thing in. So salute to the God for his work so far.
Indeed. And to real quick, just real quick, you know, referring to Medina, that's going to be real interesting to how that's tackled. I don't see the story being able to be complete without touching on Medina, without touching on Paylon, without touching on the desert, all of that. You're 100%. I would even go as far as to even touch on Now Just as far as to show where the lessons did go to and how they got there. Doesn't have to be a full in-depth, but just to show that there was that bridge and that connection. Um, but the Medina situation is going to be interesting because you're not going to be able to tell that and satisfy both sides. It's impossible. If you're honest, even if you're 100% honest, it's going to be impossible to satisfy both sides of that story because you're still, even in the honesty, is coming from a POV, you know, and everybody had their POV based on the side. Nobody had the bird eye look to see, you know, and all the way up into the 90s, all the way up into the 90s. I remember brothers, we not going to Medina. I remember that we not going to Medina. I've been to Medina. I can tell you about the stop. You know what I mean? I can tell you about the train stop. You understand what I'm saying? I can tell you about that. You know, so I hope that I Am God, Allah, talks to people who were there to tell about all of that because that could be a story within itself. So I can understand, not wanting to get too in depth into that because it's like you said, the story has to start, and it has to end, and we have to get to the end. But he has to touch on Medina, and that to me is going to be very, very, very touchy right there. Very touchy, very touchy. So I definitely want to see that, and I look forward to it. And I agree with you also. If he doesn't touch on Medina, if we don't get in the pay line, we don't get the rest of the five boroughs at the least, then that B definitely can't stand. It definitely is going to be penalized. It's definitely going to drop some levels. But hopefully we get to talk to the brother ourselves. You know what I mean? I would love to speak to the brother and interview the brother and ask. I have a whole bunch of questions about just his sources, the source material, and to his inspiration, and and to the people who even he has assisted him with his work. You know, so I appreciate you for coming on here. You have anything else you wanted to say about the film, about the brother, before we close this?
Yeah, peace to the God, man. You understand what I'm saying? Peace to the God for his endeavor. From the background that I know about the God, this isn't something that happened right now. I think he had to wait for the technology to catch up to be able to paint the picture that he wanted to paint and the story that he wanted to tell. Like you said, it's the first step is kind. It's a one-on-one sort of situation, and he's doing what he needs to do. He's blazing the trail. So even for the people who don't like it, make your own. You know what I'm saying?
Indeed,
Make your own. Make
indeed,
your own and strive to tell your story in regards to what it is, where you at. And if you aren't getting the story of where you are in this culture. You know what I'm saying? Where you at? So if you in love Allah, we should see something that's reflective of love Allah, and from your vantage point, and then how that strives to lead back to Allah, wherever you are. If you in C Medina, if you in D Mecca, whatever the case may be, I would love to see more of those stories being told by people who are true and living this particular culture versus what's on the internet right now in this regard. Like, I can't be excited about a street name. You understand what I'm saying? And there's no street academy. You
Right.
understand? So
Absolutely.
I'm more excited about a street academy than I am about a street sign naming. So let's build on that. You know the for as it stands, the God did something ill. The enlightener joint that spin on the enlightener, yeah, it did something. It did something. You know what I mean? It made it more fly. I think the parts of reaching out and reaching the people, I think he did a great job in that regard. And like I said, like you said, you want to add on with the God. So you know when he sees this, if you want to come through and add on, I think it'll be an excellent build in regards to the wisdom degree of this build that we got.
Indeed, indeed. And this was definitely a pleasure. We're definitely going to conclude when the series ends with the overall assessment and analysis and breakdown of this. Feel free to give your opinions in the comment. Knowledge Born Alive from Do the Knowledge Radio, Do the Knowledge Universe, the Do the Knowledge Universe. That's what I call it. Yeah, I mean, that's one of my homes. You can find me Do the Knowledge on a regular. I got a room in that house. You know what I'm saying? That's a fact. So, what you got going on, brother? Before you go.
I appreciate that. I got Voices of the Diaspora series, 13-part ebook series, dedicated to the Black family, from a holistic perspective. So different aspects to deal with that confront us as a Black family, from an individual Black family and a collective Black family. So got a special over the summer. My books are normally priced at $150, but you can get them between June and Black August for $50. What they said in trade places in Philadelphia is $50. You understand what I'm saying? So, yeah, that's what I got going on. A lot of stories to be told. You know what I mean? And pragmatic, cinematic Jay Black been helping me along the way with getting my storytelling acumen from a visual perspective together. So God is very useful in that regard.
I appreciate that, my brother. I appreciate that. And this was fun. We gotta actually do this. I think I'm gonna do a whole series. I think I'm gonna just start breaking down films, new films, old films, going back. We've already done stuff on your channel, on Do the Knowledge. We gave the assessment, somewhat of an assessment of Malcolm X, of the travesty, the betrayal of Malcolm X by Spike Lee. We're gonna do it. We actually got to do that again, getting even more depth and more breakdown, go scene for scene. I think we're gonna have to do a scene for scene analysis for that. But this was fun. I look forward to doing this again. Actually, I think I'm gonna do a whole show where I'm gonna do this, and we're gonna do that breakdown shows. I'm gonna have you as a regular with me on this one because this is fun. I enjoy this. So hopefully I can get you back and you could be a part of this with me. And I look forward to that. And again, we talked Allah the Father. That's another thing, real quick. I'm gonna have to interject this. One last thing. The name. I'm not gonna lie. ATF, we know as law enforcement. So that kind of right there did not sit well with me. I get it. I get the acronym, but ATF, I would have rather just Allah, personally. I would have rather just Allah. It seems like there's I don't want to offend anybody with Allah. It seems like Allah almost is scary to come with. So we do Allah the Father. You know what I mean? I'm glad he wasn't Clarence 13X in it, but you know, Allah ATF. That's my second criticism of it. And we're gonna end it with that. Anybody who watches it, I appreciate you. Leave your comments in the comment. Let us know what you think. And if you haven't seen it, check it out. I would advise you that I had seen it before you seen this because we gave you a bunch of spoilers in it. But if you haven't seen it, check it out. I am the pragmatic Che Blak, my brother Knowledge Born Allah, and we out of here. Peace.
Che Blak, straight like that.